what are we gonna do next? I think we're gonna do Leighton and the 2 Miles Edgeworth games, and then we'll go back to something else, to something with more variety. So I was gonna do Leighton next, but I think that I'm gonna do Edgeworth next, because we just got like the Edgeworth duology announced to come into Switch later this year. I'm hyped for it. All these characters' names are gonna be changed, so before I like get too into that and start calling these characters by their new localized names, I want to do this part now as a memorial to like Rhonda Light. Not Rhonda Light, I'm so effing stupid, bro. To Sebastian the Best and Bray Shields and all these other characters. So we're gonna do Edgeworth 1-2, then we'll do Leighton, then we'll do something else. So, Miles Edgeworth 1-1. Some call it Investigations 1-1. I call it Edgeworth 1-1. I'm not gonna lie to you, when I was going into this game and I knew that this game didn't have court segments, I wasn't exactly sure like how good the game was gonna be. If it's just gonna be investigation start to finish, that sounds kind of lame, not gonna lie. Wasn't sure if I would really enjoy that. But I do think that the duology as a whole overall definitely pulled it off. And Edgeworth 1-1 sort of like put to rest my doubts about that a little, because like you did have arguments in the style of the court sessions from the original Ace Attorney games. You did still have to refute points by presenting evidence. In a lot of ways, it functioned exactly the same as the original trilogy, along with like the somewhat new dynamic of being able to actually walk around the crime scene on like a 2D plane instead of it just being like a flat image that you like point and click stuff at. That was kind of cool, I guess. Did suck that it was on the DS and everything was kind of pixelated. I guess that'll get fixed in the Switch versions. Guess I'll just have to play through these games again. So I played through each of these games once, and I watched one Let's Play for Edgeworth 1, I believe. I remember this case pretty well. It's the last time we see Maggie Bird, and of course every time we see Maggie Bird, she has to get accused of murder. This game starts off with a bang, literally. Someone points a gun to Edgeworth's back, and he's like, "You've got some nerve coming into my office." It was actually kind of funny when you think about like the gall Edgeworth had to say something like that to someone pointing a gun to his back. This is ironically the first time that Gumshoe gets accused of murder, which is crazy because I feel like that's something that has happened a lot, but it really hasn't. And I feel like that feeling is mainly owing to the Edgeworth games, because I feel like it happens 2 or 3 times just throughout the course of those 2 games. Maya isn't around, so someone has to take the role of Maya, and it's Gumshoe. So this case is not only the tutorial, it's kind of like a setup for the game as a whole. Edgeworth 1 and the Edgeworth duology in general has much more of an overarching story than any of the singular games in the Ace Attorney trilogy did. Even Trials and Tribulations, where Dahlia was a presence throughout the whole game. Cases 2 and 3, she wasn't really there. The main focus of Edgeworth 1, this smuggling ring that gets established in this case, is a prominent factor of every case in the game. So this case, because it does something like that, intentionally leaves a lot of loose ends untied up. It's also not the craziest case. It's one of those stupid cases where the devs might think it's too hard to figure out if they don't show you who the culprit is immediately or something. So we like see the culprit, this athlete dude, Jack Portman, I think his name was, shoot his partner in the opening cutscene, just like Phoenix Wright 1-1, but there it's like more excusable. I don't know. Some people would say that like this is a new series, it's the Edgeworth games, so you could excuse it in to like the same extent I did here. I don't really want to do that, man. I mean, who's gonna play Edgeworth Investigations before they play Ace Attorney? Maybe someone would have back in the day, if that's just the DS game their parents happen to buy for them, and they say, "Oh, Ace Attorney is good, let's get them that." That crap ain't gonna happen anymore, not in this day and age. So I don't really want to give this case the same allowances that I gave this case when it comes to showing who the culprit is at the beginning. I hate that crap, man. I do like that there is way more mystery to it than this case, though, because this case alludes to something much bigger overall, and and you later find out that it was like Tyrell Bad of all people who was holding that gun to Edgeworth's back, and like, the file goes missing, and that isn't something that's cleared up in this case, even though Jack Portman is a member of the smuggling ring. This case presents a lot of the mechanics you see throughout the Edgeworth games. The logic connection thing where you use logic to tie points together to make new points. I think it's a cool mechanic. Not the best. Sometimes what you are supposed to do is painfully obvious, and at other times you feel like the game's really stretching in making you connect the things that you're supposed to, but I think it's serviceable, more than serviceable. In fact, I do think that that is actually a fun mechanic overall. It is somewhat reminiscent of the Magatama in the same sense that you might not be able to use it correctly yet. You might sometimes just have to go investigate and get more points before you're able to piece things together like you're supposed to. So I think that aspect of it and having to judge when it is that you have everything is really cool. I really like that. That's probably one of the main reasons why I think this is an above average mechanic. Working with familiar characters for an introductory case like this, not only just playing as Edgeworth, but having both Gumshoe and Maggie as the people you're defending being a loosely used word because Edgeworth is a prosecutor, of course, but I think does the case a really good service because you get to see a lot more of the quote-unquote defendants in the Edgeworth games because they're not just sitting in the defendant's seat not able to talk unless they're giving testimony. They do get to talk, give their own perspective on things. You get to have them interject a lot more when you're arguing with someone and when you're cross-examining than you would in the Ace Attorney games. Maggie and Gumshoe both talk a lot in this chapter. I think that the way they interact is, if you've played the Ace Attorney games first, which you probably will have, you can see that the way they interact has evolved and has become a little more intimate. I picked up on that at least, so I thought that was cute and I liked that. Also, side note, you get to see Winston Payne in the background. Edgeworth doesn't even remember who that man is. Props to that. I love roasting that man. But the puzzles here weren't anything special aside from them being solid ones to use to explore the new mechanics. I think that a case being the first one to introduce new mechanics and well integrating said new mechanics into the puzzles you're supposed to solve in that case as being the first one that you use it in, if that is done well, does add to the case a lot. I feel like it was really done solid here, but there was nothing really special about the case. The only new character here was the culprit, Jack Portman, who also pseudo serves as the prosecutor in the setup of this first Edgeworth case. Nothing too special about the character himself. I thought that his animations were really cool. I liked how he kept taking his jacket off and on. I don't know what that man was doing, but I found it humorous. I guess I enjoyed that. But unfortunately, for the most part, aside from the fact that Maggie's here, I mean, Gumshoe is a plus as well, but you see Gumshoe a lot throughout, not just this game, but throughout the whole Edgeworth duology. Much more so in this first game, I guess. This case is mostly held up by the fact that it's being the first time you're getting to experience these mechanics, and these mechanics are done a lot better later throughout the two games. So where do I want to put it? I don't think it's as good of an opening case as Ace Attorney 1-1. I think that putting it above this case would be a crime. I wouldn't consider it a slog. I do think that there's not really much wrong with this case. I think that it does what it needs to do. I even like Maggie better in this case because you know her and she's an established character and she has her dynamic with Gumshoe, so I like Maggie more in this case than I do in this case, even though she gets to be your Maya in this case and explain the mechanics to you. So I think it's an average case. It's average. It's not as good as this case. It's definitely not. I feel like if this tier list had more tiers, there could be a tier between these two, but I don't want to put it down here. I don't think that's right. It's average. Does what it's supposed to. Like I said, not really much else to say. I don't think this case really overstays its welcome. It's fine. Average. Let's do Turnabout Airlines, shall we? This case sucks because it makes Cammy Meal the killer. Why does Ace Attorney hate waifus? But in all seriousness, the whole concept of it being on an airplane, I think is really cool. That was definitely some new creative space that was ripe for exploring. So glad they did that. Miss Tenero, I think it was, who's basically your Maya throughout this entire case. I really liked her. I thought she was really cute. What she does with with like the suitcases like makes me feel really bad for her when you realize that she's like designing these things and none of them are selling, so she buys them herself just because she feels so bad just seeing them there every time that she's like on a flight. Bro, I feel bad for her, which is a nice turnaround because she's not very likable at first because she's accusing you of murder without really any solid reasoning, and you gotta get her head on straight and explain to you why it couldn't have been you. The Borginian dude, I forget his name. He's pretty funny. You'd think a character like that would be annoying. You'd think, I feel like I say that a lot about Ace Attorney characters, like side characters. You'd think this character would be annoying, but they're not. The whole thing about like the time zones in conflict with what he saw, because the plane is constantly moving through time zones and like they set their clocks in accordance with the target destination as opposed to the departing destination, which is where the man's pocket watch was set to align with. I think it's real cool. They make use of the plane dynamic really well, but also they don't feel the need to make the case conclude before you land. You get to land and then Franziska comes out of nowhere with Gumshoe, which is really cool. I think that Franziska gets to shine a lot in the Edgeworth games. I would even argue that Franziska gets more spotlight in the Edgeworth duology than she gets in Phoenix Wright 2. Or 3, of course. You get to see her doing really cool Interpol work, and that starts with this case. She also seems a lot more competent than someone who lost to Phoenix twice in a row. These games are really good for both Edgeworth and Franziska because for most of the Ace Attorney trilogy, even though those games use these two characters very, very well, they always lose, man! Except for this case, of course, this case being the obvious exception. So I think that these games do a lot of good in showing just how good they are at their jobs. I think that's good for not only the characters, but for the games in general. It makes you look back on them throughout the original Ace Attorney trilogy in a much better light. So Franziska showing up was cool. I think that the suspicion shifting from you to Miss Tenero and having her be switched out with Cammy, who turns out to be the actual culprit, as your Maya, is a really good way of switching things up. I think that this case constantly feels fresh. I really liked it. Anytime like Cammy was on screen, I was really enjoying myself. Not only was she super cute, she was also super fun. And I just really liked her personality and it was fun. And why did she have to be the dang killer? I'm not gonna get over it. I loved Cammy. I didn't want her to be the killer, man. Let's try to get over it. So, working with Franziska as a member of Interpol to solve the death of who you find out is an Interpol agent is also a really cool, fun dynamic. You find out that Cammy, as the killer, was a member of the smuggling ring as well, tying it into the first case, which, by the way, this is a flashback case. This case happened before this case. And in fact, not to get ahead of myself, but the next 2 cases happened before the first case as well, which is very interesting. Edgeworth 1 was kind of just all over the place. Not that that's like a criticism, just an observation. But this case is good. A lot of good characters. I liked both these 2 flight attendants. Franziska and Gumshoe showing up was good. I felt like this case was paced really well. I felt like different characters were focused on at the right times. I felt like they switched you being with Miss Tenero to you being with Cammy at a good time. They introduced Franziska at a good time. I feel like this case is a good case of just really being solidly written, and you don't even really think about these things when you're playing it. But I really do think that the pacing of this case is done really well. I really felt for Miss Tenero as well. I know I mentioned that already, but I do want to drive the point home that I felt really bad for her when she was talking about her suitcases, man. It was also real funny when the Borginian dude like fell off the flight of stairs and Edgeworth is having this brain blast moment and all these realizations while that man is suddenly falling down. The fact that they made that as funny as they did using pixel art on the DS is very impressive. That was fun. So I actually know exactly where I want to put this case. I want to put this case between Danganronpa 1.3 and Danganronpa 1.4, but we're also going to do our first little adjustment of the list. I am going to bump both these cases up to real solid because I feel like this case is definitely A tier, real solid, but I also don't see it ever being better than this case. Yes, it is true that Celeste is probably the easiest killer to find out in Danganronpa Danganronpa 1. And, like, opposed to that, low-key, I didn't suspect Cammy Meal, like, at all. And I don't know how I didn't, because I didn't know who I suspected, because this case didn't really exactly have a lot of characters, unless it was the Borginian dude. Maybe in my heart I was trying to hope it was him, because I really didn't want it to be Cammy, and I knew it wasn't Miss Tenero because of how they built her up, obviously. But I do feel like this case has a lot more to offer in this case, even if this case is very predictable and, like, Celeste is a bit of a letdown as a character. Playing through this case is very enjoyable. This is just, like, real solid, you know? Cases that are just real fun to play through. They may have some flaws, but they're real fun to play through. I think that this case has the least flaws of these three, but again, it's the Ace Attorney 3-3 in comparison to 1-2, or the 2-2 in comparison to 1-5 situation, where, yes, this case didn't have as many, like, faults as 1-3, but this case also didn't have the same sort of, like, peaks that 1-3 did. Danganronpa 1-3, and maybe that's just because, like, Danganronpa was my first mystery-solving game, and it just got me real excited all the way through. But I would still be more excited to, like, revisit this case than this case, more excited to watch someone play through this case than this case. I've mentioned this before as well, but I think that's ultimately the criteria I have. Which case would I prefer playing through again? Which case would I prefer seeing someone play through for the first time? But yeah, it was real solid. Like the characters, cool investigation moments, decent, real solid. Okay, boys. It's time to talk about Badgerland. My thoughts about this case are all over the place. I really don't know where I stand on this one. Let's see, where to start? I guess I should start by saying that it's another flashback case. I already mentioned this when talking about this case, but this case also takes place before this case, and you can tell because Jack Portman makes an appearance at the end of it, but that's only at the end. So you gotta be paying attention at the beginning to know when exactly everything's going on, because nothing in this game is in order. At least the end comes at the end. At the very least, this case actually comes at the end. Don't know why they did it like this. I guess so that this case can be the tutorial, but whatever. Anyway, this case also starts off with a bang. Edgeworth once again getting himself in dangerous situations, delivering ransom money to a kidnapper, and we get the most terrifying scene ever in Ace Attorney. A soulless badger walking up behind Edgeworth and clocking him on the back of the head with a sword, which not only sounds terrifying in itself, right? But that's a sword, so you think Edgeworth is about to die for a moment there. So that's a crazy way to start the case. Only the highest of props there, because that crap is effing wild. But after that crazy beginning, the case slows down considerably for a while. The first thing that happens is that Edgeworth wakes up and we get introduced to Kay Faraday, one of the most important characters of Edgeworth 1, who is basically Edgeworth's Maya, and for some reason doesn't come into the game until halfway through the game, which I guess makes sense if you look at the narrative, but it just makes me wonder why they made the narrative like that to begin with. Kay is technically in 1-4, but that's like another very far back flashback case. You only really get Kay acting as your Maya, like she's like sort of becomes Edgeworth's assistant for 2 cases. I guess she makes up for it by like being Edgeworth's assistant throughout the entirety of Edgeworth 2. But I've always thought that it was weird that Kay was introduced so late. I guess it works. It stops her from getting annoying. I was not annoyed by Kay, but I guess the possibility that I could have if she was there for longer was a possibility. She also introduces a new mechanic, Little Thief Flashback, whatever it's called, crime scene recreation, which is very cool, very unrealistic, but I don't at all dock this points for that because I think it's cool. I love that mechanic as like this sort of past flashback. Actually, ironically, kind of like Halara's semblance, not semblance, that's a stupid Ruby term, like Halara's master detective ability from Raincoat. I think that it's really cool to have a mechanic like that in an Edgeworth game. And also, we haven't talked about this yet, but obviously the Edgeworth games get rid of the mystical aspect of things, even though Edgeworth got involved with the whole spirit channeling thing and whatnot by using the Magatama in this case. That's all gone in the Edgeworth games. There is no mystical element to them. So having Kay introduce this sort of weird technology mechanic, I actually think was a step in the right direction. It goes towards the outlandish and fantastical, mystical, illegally sexual, scratch that part, nature that I feel like this game was missing up until now. It honestly, this case being bland and missing a lot of some of the more crazy, fantastical elements of Ace Attorney is one of the reasons why I was considering only putting it here, even though I really liked all of the characters in it. But Kay introduced Little Thief, and I think it was great for the case, generally speaking. We'll get to that in a minute. But like I said, once you wake up and meet Kay, the case slows down considerably. I feel like this investigation went on for a while. You meet quite the colorful cast of characters when you're investigating this case, including, but not limited to, Mike Meekins, which is not a character that I enjoy. Emma Skye, very interesting to see this be the second appearance of Emma Skye. I'm really surprised that they put Emma Skye in this case. Like, the more I think about it, she didn't really have to be there, but they did that anyway. They did it for us. I loved Emma Skye. There was a long time between me finishing this case and me starting Apollo Justice, because after I played the Ace Attorney trilogy, I then played the Miles Edgeworth duology. And then, like, I played Raincode somewhere in there as well. And then I started Apollo Justice, and I got like halfway through the first case, right? Not even that. We didn't even get to the part of suspecting Gavin yet. And then they announced, like right then, that the Apollo Justice trilogy was coming to console, and so I stopped and took a massive break before I actually played Apollo Justice far enough to get to case 2 and meet Emma. So basically what all of that was saying is that there was a very long time between me seeing Emma here and me seeing Emma here. So seeing Emma here, I really loved it. I liked Emma as a character. It's still so surprising to me that they gave her that kind of attention when she was just ultimately a DLC sidekick. But I'm glad they did, because I really like Emma Skye. I don't know why we never saw Lana Skye again, but hey, that's how it be sometimes for some of these characters. Like poor Iris. Bring Iris back. But that's not what we're talking about now. So Emma Skye comes back. Huge plus, which is good, because Mike Meekins is a bit of a minus for me. We see Wendy Oldbag. I'm neutral about Wendy Oldbag in this case. I think she's funny, but she doesn't really add much to the case. Again, I don't think she needed to be there. I almost feel like Emma Skye or Wendy Oldbag was all that was needed. I don't think you really needed both, but I'm not gonna dock the case any for adding both. I don't think that having Wendy there detracts from my enjoyment of the case. It's just a lot of people you have to talk to during the investigation, and that's like just the returning characters. That's not to talk about how this case has just as many new characters as this case. This case had Mr. Armano, the father of the kid who was kidnapped, who gave Edgeworth some strange kind of support in the past that you never really learn more about. I would have liked to learn a little more about what exactly he did. Like, he financed a trip for him or something. It's obviously money related because the guy's rich, but anyway. You got his son Lance, which you don't meet until halfway through the chapter, and Lance is an asshole, so I'm really glad he's the culprit. And then you got Lauren Pops, who's like one of the most adorable girls in Ace Attorney. I love Lauren Pops. She's so precious. I watched some like Ace Attorney tier lists before, and I saw some people not like Lauren, and I'm like, what is wrong with you people? This girl's an angel. I love this girl. Yeah, she got up to some shady shit this chapter, but it was all for love at the end of the day. I'll always have a soft spot for motivations like that. Looking at you, Iris. Iris did nothing wrong, just saying. But anyway, we got Lauren Pops, who's like precious angel, asshole son of Armano, who is of course her boyfriend because all the assholes always get the girls. We got the victim butler guy who comes out of nowhere and we know nothing about. This is also the first appearance of a certain Agent Lang, who proceeds to be quite a powerful driving force throughout both of the Edgeworth games. Again, so strange that they waited until halfway through the game to introduce a character like that. Yo, Agent Lang is a freaking asshole, but man, he makes it entertaining. That man said, logic? Who needs that? I decide who did it. That crap was wild. Agent Lang is not a villain, but I swear at the beginning, it almost felt like a different take on Von Karma. So there's a lot of running around you do in this case, a lot of investigating. There's a lot of people in costumes, which is always mad schmicks. You got Kay introducing this new mechanic, and it can be a lot to keep track of at times. There's a lot of characters here with very varying levels of character quality in a somewhat messy investigation that I feel is paced very strangely because of how high octane the beginning is and then how slow the rest of the case is. It wasn't until like once you start to like argue near the ends, not quite at the ends, like before you go into the haunted house, when you're talking about how the victim turned out to be Lauren's dad and she didn't even know. It isn't until then that this case really starts to pick up, and I think that that's a little too late, unfortunately. And then Lance's dad does that baller move where he just buys the haunted house to try to get you to not investigate, and then Kay comes in with new mechanic powers so you can investigate the state of the crime anyway. And of course it turns out that Mr. Armano is part of the smuggling ring. His son gets courted off to jail. Thankfully, Lauren was not the culprit. How many waifus does Ace Attorney kill? Eenie Miney, Dahlia Hawthorne, Iris got thrown in jail, Cammy Meal. Ace Attorney hates waifus. Can we stop killing the waifus in Ace Attorney, please? But anyway, let's shift gears a little. This case may have given me the most game overs of any Ace Attorney case ever. This is like the only case where I remember a segment where Agent Lang was arguing something. I think it was about how Lauren and her dad already knew that they were related or something, and I swear it was impossible to find the contradiction. I can't think of a single other moment in any of these games where I had to stop for the night and come back another day because I couldn't figure out the answer. And that wasn't even the final BS part of it. When you were investigating the haunted house, it took me like forever to even find what they wanted me to find in there. I don't know what it was about this case that was so cursed. It's probably the Badgers, demonic freaks. They cursed this darn case. A lot of nonsense happens in this case too. I distinctly remember Mike Meekins losing his gun because he's Mike Meekins. Like, how does that even happen, bro? That crap's supposed to be like snapped into a holster or something. So ranking this case is tricky. Had a crazy beginning, some really difficult arguments to like find the answers to, in my opinion. A lot of new characters, some one-offs, some returning like Agent Lang and Sheena. Sheena also makes her first appearance in this case. Agent Lang makes a much stronger impression with the speeches he gives to his goons and whatnot. Kay introducing her new mechanic. This case is all over the place, and I'm really not sure where to rank it. Let me think for a moment.
Moments later.
Okay, I've spent probably like the past half hour thinking about this case's placement. I don't know, man. I thought about somewhere up here. I thought about somewhere in here. I thought maybe like somewhere like in here, but there's a lot of things to consider when talking about this case. This case has a lot of things to it that I need to think about when ranking it. The new Little Thief mechanics, a bunch of new characters and whatnot, some real high, at least for me, difficulty spikes in terms of figuring out how to get through the argument sections. I think I'm gonna put it right here. I think I'm gonna put it in fairly decent. I don't think that the character quality here is overall as high as it is for this case, but otherwise this case does have a lot to it. Lots of stuff going on, new very important characters and new mechanics. Not much to say in conclusion about this one. I just think it's good, fairly decent case. Man, I do think this case is more on par with some of these down here. I am actually gonna swap Danganronpa 1-4 with Miles Edgeworth 1-2. This case had a lot of really crazy moments to it. I think this is more a real solid case. I remember the point where Byakuya drank the powder so vividly. A lot of really impactful moments in this case that made me freak out. I do think that puts it above just generally good pacing and some likable characters like I think this case has. I think that the praise I have for this case more so falls into good, fairly decent. Yeah. I think I'll leave it like that for now. We are back with some more cases. Got my Phoenix Wright bird shirt on. It's been a few days, and I'm not gonna lie, during those few days, I keep looking at everything from Sakura to like Edgeworth 3, and I'm just not satisfied with like anywhere I could put any of these 4 cases now that I have them up next to each other. This case is so much infinitely better than this case in my eyes, so having them next to each other just feels wrong, but I also feel like this case is just a bump above all of these. This case feels better than this case. When I think about the memories that I have with this case, they're just so much better than the ones I have with this case, but this case feels like it should be up here. Like, putting this case in the same tier as this case also feels wrong. A big part of me wants to switch these 2 cases, right? Because it's such a weird dynamic I have here. Because I want this case to be a tier above this case, and I want this case to be a tier above this case. But the problem is that I do think this case is like better than this case. Maybe I could give this case some allowances and say that it gets better because it manages to be a case that I consider real solid even though there's no voice acting, but that's cheating, you know? That's just cheating. It's so weird doing this because, like, I do want to reiterate, looking back, I do think I enjoyed this case more than this, but putting this here and this here just feels so much more correct. I don't know if y'all have ever had an experience like that or ever seen like someone else do a tier list where they really feel like I don't know. I don't get it. Maybe, like, okay, I'm here today to rank some more cases, so I'm gonna switch these 2 back like they are now, and we're gonna keep going. We're gonna see how I feel, because oh man, I've been, like, this has been bugging me non-stop, this conundrum right here. This feels more right, but it's also wrong, because, like, I don't know. Maybe it'll feel more comfortable when I get more cases here, because putting these 2 cases next to each other just feels just completely incorrect. So I'm just gonna leave it like that for now, and we're gonna see how it looks a bit later. I know that since I'm not doing this all in one day, my mindset is a bit all over the place, so I'm trying to be consistent with my criteria and think about it and whatnot, so we're gonna see. So the first case we're gonna be ranking today is Edgeworth 1-4, the introduction of Callisto U. I love Callisto U. Why did she have to be the killer? So this is like a flashback within a flashback. While Edgeworth is doing this case, he like looks back on things in this case, which is very strange. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sure if I really like that, but this case is real cool. We get to see Von Karma in the past, and we get to see Von Karma in the past in the future as well. Absolute banger, that is. But we'll get to that in a little bit. For the time being, Von Karma doesn't show up too much in this case, but him being there is really cool. We get to see little Francisco, which is really, really cool. I think that that's really cute. We get to see little K, which feels interesting because you would have thought Edgeworth would have remembered this beforehand, but he didn't remember because of plot convenience. Just don't worry about it. We have another instance of Gumshoe being the Maya of the Edgeworth games and getting accused of murder. I think that this whole setup is real cool with the defense attorney and the person who is claiming to be the Yatagarasu, or that claiming he didn't kill him and that he was told to kill the guy that he did, and then they both end up dead. Motivations are everywhere when you're talking about the Yatagarasu. They tried to pull some mask-to-mask BS here where it's like the victim was like the Yatagarasu, K's dad was the Yatagarasu, K is the Yatagarasu, and then it gets even crazier in the next case where it turns out that Tyrell Bad and Callisto U are all the Yatagarasu. I have a lot more to say about that. We'll get there in a minute. But this case has a lot to it. I think that the actual premise is very interesting. The whole twist with the like perfume, I think, was really cool. I actually did really enjoy that. You get to cross-examine the judge, which is really cool. That's not something that I think ever happens again. That was really fun. You'd think that that's something that might have come up more, or maybe more in a mainline Ace Attorney game, but no, it happens here in this flashback case in the Edgeworth spinoff. But to get back to the main point, I really do think this case's highlight is Callisto U. She is so much fun. I love her theme. I love her personality. It's great. It's adorable. I love it. Anytime Callisto U is on screen, I'm having a good time. I'm enjoying playing the game. I'm having fun. Anytime Callisto U is there. Which is why it makes me so mad they made her the killer. I need to stop with that, man. I'm gonna freaking freak myself out or something, bro. The stuff we get with the Yatagarasu secret weapon and Little K to set up for this case is okay. I don't think it's like the best part about this case. It's decent. Callisto U holding up a Glock to Edgeworth and just blasting is really funny. Oh, how could I forget that this case introduces Tyrell Bad? A badass character. We don't have another hard-boiled detective like that in Ace Attorney. Like, at all. Like, you gotta go to Tyrone Cuthbert if you want another one of those. This is like cross-examining the judge. Having a detective like that feels like something that should be in a mainline Ace Attorney game, but it's just not. This case just has a lot of unique experiences that you would think you'd feel more of throughout the Ace Attorney games, but they're sort of like confined to this case and like a little bit of this case as well. And I think that really puts it in the upper echelon, for me at least. It's a lot of fun. I don't think the actual investigation and puzzle solving are like really up there, you know. I feel like the whole gumshoe eating crap on the bench when his head was right below the window so the judge couldn't see him and something is because K's real short and all that crap. It was fine. It was serviceable, but the case solving wasn't something like this or this or this or this. Definitely nothing on the Danganronpa level. But I think that the best case, the best place, not the best case, the best place to put this case with Callisto U, introduce Callisto U, we get almost all of Callisto U that we will ever see, which is a tragedy. We get a lot of Tyrell Bad. I think the only place I could put this case is in A+ tier. I think it's amazing. It's very enjoyable. Anytime Callisto U is there, I'm having a good time. It's very enjoyable. Where in A+ tier though? Let's think for a moment. I feel like this case has a lot in common with this case, where it's just like good characters, not the best investigating segments, but like this case introduces Maya, this case introduces Gumshoe, Red White is a great villain, this case introduces Callisto U, who is in herself a great villain, Tyrell Bad, Little K, Little Franziska, Von Karma makes an appearance without it being locked behind the unfun Yanni Yogi stuff. The main thing that this case has on this case is that I think that the twists in the case, in the trial, when you're actually figuring stuff out, are way better here than here. Even though Callisto U being the villain is a pretty good twist in and of itself, debatably better than anything you see in this case, but I just think that getting Red White with the receipt is like it's just really good. I guess the Yatagarasu's tool thing also kinda came out of nowhere, you know? As much as I love Callisto U, I don't think she can hold a candle to Dahlia Hawthorne, so I don't think putting her introduction above Dahlia's is something that I could do. This case also has the big downside of showing you who the killer was immediately. When you figure out that it's Callisto U, it hits, especially since Callisto U is so fun, at least for me. So figuring out that she was the killer is pretty darn impactful. You know, I'm sort of convincing myself to do it. I'm gonna put it above this case. I'm gonna put this case right here. Amazing, very enjoyable, had a lot of fun with it. It's interesting because this is also a flashback case that introduces a big villain, where you get to see younger versions of a lot of the characters. So it's like actually pretty interesting that I ended up putting this case just right behind this one. So yeah, we're gonna leave it there. Next is the finale of Edgeworth 1. I'm about to drop a big spoiler bomb on y'all. If any of y'all are watching, just don't care about Edgeworth, or just watching to see me rank these. You see this man right here? Koikus Alba? That man has extraterritorial rights. Just so you know. I think he wants that to be made very clear to everyone. This case is huge. There's a lot to unpack here. This is a daunting task, like having to talk about this case. This case's setup is actually very comparable to this case's setup, where basically the Maya of the game says, there's something I gotta go do, come help me do it, basically, sort of thing. So Kay drags Edgeworth to this embassy, which is a very interesting place because it's a building shared between two countries, and they're each considered like being in a different country when you're in them. And as you can imagine, the shenanigans that result as a result of this are a huge mess. So Mask to Mask 2 is in this case, which I thought was hysterical, because like I was saying, this case, and even going into this case where you, like, the whole Yatagarasu triangle thing is figured out, they're really mirroring the who is Mask to Mask thing, like, to an extreme degree, and they wanted to amp it up to 11, where everyone is the Yatagarasu. Kay, Tyrell Bad, Callisto Yu, who is also Sheena. Some people even thought that Mask to Mask 2 was the Yatagarasu, which is absolutely wild. Now, admittedly, that didn't last very long, but it is pretty funny to think about. I, unfortunately, had the misfortune of getting spoiled that Sheena was Callisto Yu before I played this case, which is very saddening because I can tell you for a fact there's no way in this galaxy I would have ever guessed that prior to seeing her laugh. She has like the same poses where she like tilts her head up and puts her like hand on her hip and whatnot, but I swear by all things holy I didn't see it. I would have been surprised when the reveal finally came. So because the internet sucks and I got spoiled, I'm gonna give this case a couple extra points for that, because I think that is a great twist. This case has a lot of characters. You have Koikis Alba, which turns out to be the main villain. That was honestly a pretty crazy revelation when you see the little old man go from what he was to this. That was pretty crazy. You got Ambassador from the other place who acts super suspicious the whole time, but turns out he never actually did anything wrong that we know of in before Edgeworth 3. But, like, the fires happen, one of the embassies bursts into flames, Kay gets accused of murder, because of course she does, because it's a case all about the Yatagarasu. I feel like the investigation segments of this case were hit or miss. Some of them were kind of fun, and some of them were kind of messy, some of them dragged. I think that it's kind of like the general agreed consensus that the ending of the case dragged, where you gotta like catch this man in his lie, stop him from getting on his flight. We'll get to that in a minute, but just to talk about the investigation segments, investigating the like burned half of the building wasn't that much fun. I liked it a lot more when we got to the Mask to Mask 2 stuff, because Francisca showed up, and that made it fun. Larry Butts showed up, which always gives a case points. The Larry shenanigans in this case are really funny. There's this one scene where he just comes out of the pool, just out of nowhere, and Edgeworth just freaks out, and it's hilarious. 10 out of 10 scene we'll never forget. Wendy Oldbag bouncing off Edgeworth and bouncing off Larry is very fun. I feel like this case is like another great use of Wendy Oldbag. I feel like she doesn't overstay her welcome. She does what she's supposed to do well. Figuring out the rotating fireplaces and Larry accidentally giving a love letter to Oldbag is good stuff. I enjoyed all of that. Like I said, once Kay is cleared of suspicion for the murder in the room where the fire took place, this case gets a lot better. And then it keeps going. It like keeps going. There's a scene where you gotta like rearrange the spotlights to show that the Yatagarasu wasn't actually there. I'm not trying to do like a breakdown of the whole case. You can probably tell by the fact that this isn't really an organized reflection, but I gotta touch upon these points because this case was a lot. It was a lot. You deduce all kinds of crap in this case. The water tanks are connected and the body like went down when the water level was lowered and like went between the two embassies that way. That's a very memorable thing. I thought that was really cool to figure out. Probably one of the peaks of like investigative. I think that this case, even though it doesn't have the best start, has some of the best investigation segments of the whole game. I think that maybe this case is better in general, but like I liked a lot of the investigation stuff in this case. A lot of great character moments. Because of how long this case is, every character has their own moment to shine, and I think that that's really good. I'm not opposed to long cases if they're like filled with meaningful stuff. I don't feel like it was an absolute amazing roller coaster start to finish like all of these cases were, but I think that it was for the most part pretty good. But we have to talk about a few more things. We got to talk about the Yatagarasu nonsense because Callisto Yu comes back and it's revealed that she's Sheena. That's a crazy twist, and I really liked that. Tyrell Bad shows up and tries to shoot her, and that's wild. And it's revealed that the Yatagarasu was a trilogy. It was a Triforce all along. You got Agent Lang being an absolute badass, diving in, taking the shot to the leg. I think that's really cool. I think this is obviously Agent Lang's like time to shine. He was kind of just an asshole in this case. So the Agent Lang moments were really cool. Sheena moments were really cool. Got a lot of Franziska. I love the dynamics between Old Bag and Larry. And for the most part, a lot of the investigation is good, even though there is a lot of it, and it can't keep up that higher level of quality all the way throughout. But we also have to talk about the ending of this case and how it takes 3 hours. Once Sheena is dealt with and in custody for the Gadagarasu stuff, she tells you she didn't actually kill anyone tonight, and then you go on this long escapade where you figure out that it's Alba who's actually the mastermind of the smuggling ring, which is a little disappointing because even though it's like an ambassador and that's like a high profile target, it's still no one we knew up to this point. It's a great reveal contained within the chapter, but overall throughout the whole game, he didn't have the same presence throughout as like Godot did. I mean, I know that like that's not always the case. Like Matt Ungard, D Killer were introduced in the last chapter of Ace Attorney 2, but Miles Edgeworth 1 was much more of a singular overarching story about this smuggling ring. So it would have been a lot better to get hints of this character or see this character in a chapter or two beforehand. Him being a chapter-contained character, I think, is a lot more noticeable of an issue when the whole game is basically telling one story. This is much more of a chapter-contained story. This is obviously a chapter-contained story, but it was still a great twist for within the chapter. But on the other hand, this argument takes 15 billion years, and I do think it's funny. Every time he holds his hand up and like this and says he's gotta catch his flight, that's funny. And his theme was powerful theme. This man tells you about how he's gonna miss a flight 15 billion times, and you just gotta tell that man to stay there. Every single character in the cast has a moment where they have to pull something out of thin air in order to stop this man, which I think is great for the team effort aspect of the game, but it almost feels like every character's individual efforts is diminished. When they manage to keep him here, you still can't finish the argument and someone else has to do it. So that felt a little cheap. Almost. It's like a double-edged sword, because on one hand, every character gets their own moment, right? But on the other hand, the character moments being so jam-packed together makes them feel a lot less impactful and more inconsequential than they otherwise would have been. If you think the final confrontation of this chapter is a slog as well, it's gonna bring down the whole chapter for you, potentially even the whole game. I think that the length of this final confrontation can hurt this whole game's ranking in some people's eyes. I'm not sure if I feel like that, but as you can tell, I think the fact that the highest ranking Edgeworth case so far is like, it doesn't dip into S at all, I think that this is overall a much more mid game than like mainline Ace Attorney trilogy. This case has a lot of aspects to consider when you're ranking it. For some, I could put it like somewhere down here. For some, I could put it like somewhere up here. It's not going in double S. There's no way. I'm sorry, my Edgeworth 1 finale. You're not that good. I do think it is overall better than Ace Attorney 1-4, and I don't think it's as good as this case, so we're gonna put it somewhere in here. Somewhere in these 3 tiers. I think we're gonna put it, oh man, I don't know, there's so many different things to this case. Like, you could put it in any of these 3 tiers and you would have a really good argument for doing so. Is it fairly decent? Is it real solid? Is it amazing? I don't know. Like, I think like I enjoyed this case more, but this case has better moments, and there's so much more of this case, so it's like I had more good times and like a general longer amount of time playing through this case that I enjoyed than this. But I think the percentage of how much of this case was good is better than this. So how do I rank that? I want to put this higher because I like having more. So even if the percentage of how much is good isn't as high, if there is more in general to play through that is good, that I think is more important to me. It's more content, the experience lasts longer, there's more to it, there's more to remember, more moments overall, but there's also something to be said for like a more shorter, more memorable experience. This isn't even a short case. By no means. This is not a short case. This case just takes 15 years. Part of me also feels like it's wrong to put it below this case, because this case is mostly carried by Callisto U in my eyes, and Tyrell Bad, I suppose. The new characters of this case weren't as good, but I feel like the returning characters do a better job, because Larry Windy, I actually really liked in this case. This is another really hard ranking. Really difficult. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. I've decided. Because I decided to put this case above this case, even though I feel like this case is better for some, like, weird factors, I'm actually gonna put this case right behind this case in good, fairly decent. I like Cammy Meal and Tanira Rhodes more than the new characters in this case. The returning characters are really good. It's true. It's fairly decent. There's a lot of good stuff here, but there's a lot of stuff you have to solve, and it's not all real fun to do. This case has a lot of big bombs that are dropped on you, but I also compare it to something like this case, which also has a lot of big bombs, and this case freaked me out more. I was freaking out when I was playing this case. I really could do this. Like, I really could. It's just that I feel like for what this case is, I enjoy it a lot, and I really want to rank it an A. So, we're gonna put it there, right? It's fairly decent. Am I forgetting anything? There's a lot to forget about this case because there's so much. It does have that whole scene where someone was killed in the dressing room, but you don't actually go get to investigate in there. Maybe because the devs ran out of money or because it would make the case even longer. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. I'm gonna leave it there. I do think it's fairly decent. There are some things that detract from the overall enjoyability here. I don't like it as much as this case. I do think that this is a good way to describe it. It's good and fairly decent. Man, these tiers right here, B through A+, I don't know, man. I might have to go back when we're done and rethink everything in here because there's a lot of things that I could change around in these three tiers. But for now, we're gonna move on to Edgeworth 2, and I don't remember Edgeworth 2 nearly as much as I remember Edgeworth 1. I only experienced this game once, and that was when I first played through it. So we're gonna try our best to remember what the heck happened in this game, because a lot happened in this game. A lot happened in this game. I think when we're done with Edgeworth 2, or maybe when we're done with Layton, we're gonna go back and I'm gonna like harshly re-examine these three tiers to see if everything in there is where it's supposed to be, because I ain't feeling good about how these three are looking. We're gonna do that in a bit. But for right now, let's check out Edgeworth 2-1. So, for a tutorial case, this case does a lot. This case does on the level of what this case does for this game. You get an absolute bomb of Shelly the Killer showing up in the first case of the game, which is absolutely wild. This case also introduces one of the best mechanics since the Magatama, potentially the best mechanic in Ace Attorney besides the Magatama, which is logic chess. As far as minigames where you don't have to gather evidence to beat them, where you just have to figure it out, that mechanic is really good. Logic chess was an absolute great addition to Edgeworth 2 and really helped it become better than what Edgeworth 1 was, almost just by itself. You do see the return of Kay's Little Thief mechanic in this game as well, but I think logic chess is just really good. It just shines better and better the more you go through the game, and this case introduces it, so that's a plus. This game gives a great little nod to the conclusion of Edgeworth's first arc, in the sense that this case takes place on Gourd Lake, which I think is very symbolic, and the whole concept of the case is really cool. A presidential assassination attempt, which by the way is kind of time sensitive right now, but we're not going to talk about it. As far as in this game goes, it's done really well and really cool. The whole red jacket thing is set up very mysteriously, and I think that the payoff that it gets later on in the game is really cool, so I do want to give this case some extra points for setting up that plot point. Knightley is a cool villain. I don't remember the specifics of how this case turns out. I know that the plane had extraterritorial rights installed inside of it somewhere, but we did eventually get to go inside, confront the president, and the president also has a really great twist that you get to see later down the game as well. And this case, setting that up, I think is also really, really good. In a lot of ways, it kind of reflects how Case 1-1 set up the Mukuros, Ikusaba, Junko stuff in Danganronpa, and you all know how much I love Danganronpa 1-1. This case basically introduces Lotta Heart 2 as a character, and I do think that really sucks. Because Lotta Heart is the worst witness. Lotta Heart is the worst witness. I don't want to see her. I don't want to see characters that are like her or that are associated with her. Stop. Stop with that. You see so much of Lotta Heart. You see more of her in this game. We didn't need a character like this in the first case. And yes, that does hurt the case's ranking in my eyes a little. But honestly, aside from it being just a shorter case, that's the only real downside I can give this case. Shelly the Killer's a bomb. The whole case is focused on really interesting subject matter and just slowly going from investigating outside the red jacket setup to investigating in the plane, and then you learn the secret about the president, and then Shelly the Killer has this really cool moment where he tries to assassinate him, but then he realizes he's not the real president, which you don't even realize until later in this game, and he does this real badass thing where he like makes to jump off the plane, and he like looks at you over his shoulder and says some badass Shelly the Killer shit. Oh my god, this case is real good. It's true that a lot of the specifics of how we figure out the red dot and whatnot and how we get Knightley, they're all not stuff I remember too well, but even Knightley himself turns out to be super relevant throughout the course of the game because he turns out to be the person that Sir Dogan is playing correspondence chess with. He was also the best friend of Simon Kies, I believe. I think that's how it works. I'm trying real hard to remember Edgeworth 2. Please don't roast me in the comments for not remembering it too well. There's a lot of games here. I'm not replaying through all of them for this tier list, but I think this case is phenomenal. Despite being an introductory case, despite being short but sweet, this case is really, really good. Investigating in this case is fun, and I think that is probably one of the weakest points of Edgeworth 1. Is that, yes, characters, Callisto Yu, really good. Lauren Pops, Cammy Meal, really good characters. But the actual investigative parts of the game just never lived up to the standard that we saw in the Ace Attorney trilogy. And this was probably the most fun I've had investigating in Edgeworth up to this point. I don't know if I'm like gaslighting myself and that wasn't actually the case because I played this game like a year or two ago, but this case is real cool. It's really cool self-contained, and it's also really cool in the grand scope of the full game. I'm even confident putting it right here. I'm putting it in phenomenal, near flawless. I'm putting it above the Mask to Mask stuff. I'm putting it above Eeny Miny. This case, it's really good, especially when you considering it's an Ace Attorney first case. Ace Attorney first cases aren't nearly as long or in-depth as Danganronpa ones. So doing what this case does is a big deal. It's a big deal. It's a great ass case. It's fun. Everything about it's good. The characters, the investigation, the setup for the game overall. You could even tell me it's an SS tier case. And were it not for the fact that these cases are all just absolutely great, I wouldn't even be able to say you're wrong, because there's like nothing wrong with this case aside from the fact that I really hate Lotta Heart 2, but I am not gonna bump it down any more than this just because of that. No way. For everything that this case does, it's phenomenal, man. Next, we have Edgeworth 2-2. So this is gonna be another one of those cases where I kind of feel like this case is better than this case, but I'm probably gonna rank this case lower because it's longer. And yes, there are better moments, but there's also lower dips, you know? So this case does an awful lot. I feel like this case's length might be on par with this case's. I'm not even capping. This case does a lot. So this case introduces Ray Shields, which is an amazing character, but he kind of comes off as an asshole in this case. Sebastian DeBest, which I thought would be annoying, but turned into an absolute meme lord, and I loved him. Justine Courtney, who is both hot and the worst judge I've ever seen. A whole bunch of one-off case characters like Patricia Rowland, who turns out to be the main villain. You also get the punching guy with the polar bear, who we see surprisingly a lot of. And then you get to see like new characters who end up being returning characters like Simon Kios, your defendant. I think it's really interesting to see Edgeworth work directly on the behalf of a defendant who is currently in the detention center. We get to see Sir Dogan, who surprisingly becomes a pretty prominent force in future cases, and I think that that's crazy. And he has a real presence. Just while we're talking about him, that man is menacing. The whole dog crap, oh my god, the intro cutscene for this case, I completely forgot that dog crap was crazy, man. I didn't know what was going on. I'm pretty sure I played this game after Great Ace Attorney Chronicles, and after that Hound of the Baskervilles nonsense, seeing that dog, it schmixed me, because I'm so used to early on in Ace Attorney games, like the second case in Ace Attorney 1, for example, just showing me who the killer was. I thought for sure that that dog proved that Dogan was the killer. Holy crap, did this case schmix me in the best of ways. That's not even all. We get to see Frank Sawit again. Frank Sawit, who, by the way, is supposed to be dead, because in Ace Attorney, they clearly execute criminals like Morgan Fay and like Dahlia Hawthorne, who have been accused of murder. So why this man is even still alive and has potential to get out on probation or something is a mystery to me in terms of the lore. I don't know how the sentences, I guess we never see the like higher court sentences where they determine like what the punishments are supposed to be or anything like that. But I don't know why that man's alive. We also get to see the return of Regina Barry, which might make some people moan, but as you all know, I thought Regina was the best part of this case. I was really glad to see Regina return. And by the way, this just goes to prove what I was saying earlier about how the localization team was smart to not change her age, because that would have messed up the continuity they were going for here. And all I've talked about so far is how many characters are at play here. This game in general juggles a lot of characters all at once. I'm not gonna lie, I don't even remember if Kay is in this case yet. If Kay was like hanging out with Edgeworth when he was doing this case, I think she was. And I think Gumshoe was also there too. This case had so many people running around. I know this case like takes place in a prison, but this really feels like the Mob of the Dead COD Zombies like Ace Attorney equivalent for a lot of reasons. I don't know why I'm saying that. That wasn't really relevant to what I was saying. I kind of just wanted to say that. So there's a lot going on here, and most of it's really good. I love Ray Shields. Sebastian DeBest is amazing comic relief. I think that Judge Courtney is a very interesting character to basically act as the main force of opposition against Edgeworth, because she is a judge, and you would think that a judge would be more impartial, not like making her own arguments like this. I guess she's doing it on Sebastian's behalf, because anyone could look at Sebastian and see he's an idiot. The Sir Dogan stuff was very intimidating, and I thought that him having been Knightley's like correspondence just part, the victim was also Knightley. That's a great segue, like tying this case into this case. Like, yo, you don't have to have the second case be a flashback case, Edgeworth. I know I like sort of praise this case, but this case is way better, man. This is how you use the Very Big Circus in a much better way. Just use Regina and new characters. Roland, I think, was a great villain. The whole crocodile stuff at the end is such a memorable way to have gotten her. I think that that final way that you finally catch the villain is like one of the main selling points for how to rank cases on this list. And also Simon Kios, however you pronounce his name, filling the role that he does in this case sets him up as someone you would never suspect to be the main villain of the game so well. And I think that a lot of how impactful that twist ended up being is owed to his characterization and establishment within this case. Lots of fun logic chess as well. This is another phenomenal case. I am gonna say it. I think that this case has no flaws. whatsoever, aside from the fact that this case is, again, really, really long, and it does dip in some places. Like, I don't think that cross-examining Frank Sod was very fun, even though him returning in general is really cool and raises, like, some very interesting questions about lore and about how punishments are administered to convicts who committed murder or whatever. And the polar bear guy was also not my favorite character, because like I completely forgot about him because he's overshadowed by so many more great characters. I kind of want to put it here, but it's just Ray Shields, man. Like, this case introduces the Ray Shields, the grooviest man in Ace Attorney. Look at this standard Edgeworth 2 is setting. The first two cases are better than everything in Edgeworth 1. And these two cases deserve to be above everything in Edgeworth 1. When you look at all that these cases do, both within themselves and for the full game, it's phenomenal. This crap's been great, man. I love this so much. And then... and then you had this case. This case goes right here. Right here. This case is an unparalleled masterpiece. How do you even write something like this? This case? Oh my god! The whole flashback aspect, playing as Edgeworth's dad, Ray Shields going back and forth. I told you, Ray Shields was kind of an asshole in this case. I didn't even really like him, like at all. This case, complete 180. Ray Shields is like one of my favorite characters all of a sudden, and that's from a character who did not give a really good first impression. I do think that Ray Shields did a lot for this case. His introduction made this case interesting. This case introduces a lot of characters. And like, not many of them give good first impressions, even though they function really well. This gave my opinion of Ray Shields a complete 180. What a great character. The Edgeworth's dad stuff, holy crap. This case tied itself into Ace Attorney 1. How do you even do that? There's so much lore that we didn't even think about how it hadn't been explored yet. That was explored in this case. Not only do we get to explore that history leading up to this case, we get to see the case where Von Karma takes the penalty on his record. Admittedly, we don't see the penalty, but we do get to like investigate that case. We get to go against Von Karma. Tyrell Bad is there! That's so cool! And how they tied it into this case going on in the modern day is so masterful. Ray Shields is such a highlight of this case, but this case has a lot of highlights. I think that both Sebastian and Courtney shine a lot more in this case than they do in this case. They got going in this case, but now they're really up to speed. I love Catherine Hall, like, to death. Catherine Hall is written so well. Her motivations and everything happening the way it does, the setup here, where she's trying to do all this to like get Mr. Masters out of prison, and he's also a great character as well. He shows himself to be this sort of indomitable force, a true man among men, and you see his will slowly deteriorate the longer the case goes on, and it just feels so real that he doesn't care if he's found guilty in the original case back in the day. He just wants it to be over with, man. They could have easily separated this case into two different cases. A flashback case and the modern day version of the case. Ace Attorney has done that before with the Dahlia stuff. I think that there is a world where this case and this case were the same case, and you flash back and forth between them. And this case does that so well. I don't think that if this case was separated into two cases that either of them would make it to this tier. But they're woven together so masterfully. And everything here is just unparalleled. Oh, it's so good. Even Larry is here. Larry is here doing shenanigans. This is another, by the way, this is another one of those cases that I had a moment that I just couldn't figure out. And I remember it vividly. It was the moment where Larry's drawing was showing that the fabric of the cart was not the color that it actually was. And I thought that that was just like Larry shading things bad. I didn't think about that for the longest time. That crap took me forever to figure out. The fact that they not only brought Larry back, but brought Larry back as Laurice Donham again was just super, super fun. And this is all while not even taking into consideration how cool the specifics of this actual case were. The specifics of the dessert making contest, Delicious Scones is a great side character. She was so fun to interact with, and this man, Gustavia, I think is his name, who turns out to be like the dad of Simon Keys, by the way, which is just even crazier for the concept of the whole game. Very interesting villain. We get him in a very interesting way where it turns out that if you're out of the country, the amount of time it takes before you can like be convicted for a crime is put on pause. That's a really unique way to have gotten the villain, so like points there as well. But the specifics of the dessert contest and how Delicious Scones, she was like a pharmacist, and how the book like wasn't actually for desserts, it was for medicine or whatever, and how the dad of Knightley and Gustavia were basically like working together in order to like go through the competition, and you find out what everyone's been doing behind the scenes as you go. In this case, keeps you invested all the way through. Investigating this is so much fun. It's so fun. It's so like everything about this case is great. It could even make it above this case were it not for the fact that this case is so high octane and has some of the best twists in the series and like keeps you on the edge of your seat. But I would say that for pure enjoyment of playing through, this case does beat this case. I do think this case is better overall, but this case was peak. This is peak Investigations. This case was phenomenal, bro. Look at how great Edgeworth 2 looks on my ranking. You'd think it would be my favorite Ace Attorney game, just looking at all this. But it's not. And that's because once we get to the conclusion, I feel like the quality kind of begins to dip. So this case is when we start to see some of the payoffs for this game start to come to fruition. Let's take things one thing at a time here. This case starts with Kay being taken to Edgeworth. She had an encounter with Red Coat Man, and she has lost her memory. And to begin with, I do want to say that I actually do like this. I really like Insomniac Kay, and she brings such a different vibe to the game and to interact with than normal Kay does, and I think it's a really nice change of pace. I really like Insomniac Kay, and you have Insomniac Kay for a while. This is probably the case I remember the least out of Edgeworth, and I don't think you get normal Kay back until like the end of this case. And to me, that was a good thing, because I liked interacting with Insomniac Kay, and I think that the mystery of the red jacket guy is a really well set up one, and I was interested in that at the beginning. So this case had some really good setup, but then the case starts. A lot of heart is in this case. L, investigating the death of the, I forget what she even was. Was she a judge or a prosecutor? The woman who died in the room. My God, I can't remember crap about this. That was kind of interesting. It wasn't the best. Wasn't really a big fan of the nurse old lady duo. Those weren't my favorite characters. It was kind of interesting when you realize that they weren't being completely upfront with you, but they still weren't my favorite characters. Justine Courtney throws around threats all case long about taking away Edgeworth's badge, which pays off in the end because even Edgeworth is like, F this, you can have it, bro. I hate when a lot of heart is involved. I think that just the concept of having like a black market auction in that room is just kind of ridiculous. That's like on the 52nd floor of some building. How did they even get all of that crap up there, man? It kind of just made no sense to me. Blaze the Best makes a pretty good villain. Probably the highlight of the case is when Edgeworth gets thrown in jail, but I know that like this is the actual finale, but we started to get like some payoffs in this case, and I don't really think that they lived up to standard. I don't think this case was that fun. Edgeworth being thrown in jail was cool. You get to see like a low point for Edgeworth that you've really never seen before. I guess there was a lower point for him here. He was actually confident when he was in jail here. And I do want to reiterate that Kay as an amnesiac might be my favorite Kay. This is like the most enjoyable Kay has been for me, and I do really like how that was set up. Franziska was also in this case, which I honestly just had to look up and refresh myself a little because this case kind of feels a little empty looking back on it. And I just looked through like the summary of all that happens, and there wasn't anything big that I forgot. Franziska is kind of forgettable. She's kind of overshadowed. She doesn't do much here. I'm not even sure why she's even here. It's kind of just because it's an Edgeworth game, I guess. So a lot of heart isn't very fun. The prospects, the whole actual case of like the black market stuff didn't click with me. It didn't make sense. Justine Courtney is kind of a bitch throughout this case. The most so that she is in the entire game, to the point where even Edgeworth gets to the point where he says, just F it, take my badge. Franziska doesn't really do much here. Conversely, Blaze is a good villain. Seeing Edgeworth in jail, but confident is kind of cool. And the K Amnesiac stuff was peak for me. Peak of this case, I mean. So let's put this into perspective, right? Blaze the Best is not nearly as good as Manfred von Karma. Manfred von Karma's an amazing villain, and I still put this case in average because I don't think this case is that fun to play. I think this case is less fun to play, and Blaze isn't as good of a villain as Manfred. This case also has better moments than this case. The only really good thing about this case is Amnesiac K. And even then, that's just like me personally really liking the vibe. That's not a really big plus. I'm gonna put it in D tier. I am. And I'm even gonna put Samurai above it because Samurai has some iconic moments, and I don't remember any specific moments from this case that stand out. Blaze is a way better character than anyone introduced in this case, but I still think this case is just generally even better to play. So, unfortunately, Edgeworth 2 takes a huge dip in quality here for me. That's why I don't consider Edgeworth 2 to be one of my favorite Ace Attorney games. Everything after this case just soils it so much. But having said that, this case, based on that sentence I just said, you might think that I think this is bad. This is not bad. This is another case that has a lot going on. It is a direct continuation of this case, picking up literally a few seconds after this case ends, which is very interesting because I'm not sure that ever happens again in like all of Ace Attorney. Maybe it does at some point and I'm just forgetting, but it's a very smooth transition, a smooth segue. So this case tells a lot of stories. Justine Courtney gets a big redemption arc in this case. Sebastian the Best has an amazing arc in this case. I really love his arc. Your logic chess, when you find Sebastian tied up in that garage where you have your logic chess, the most memorable logic chess in the game by far. All kinds of weird stuff involving the president unravels here, and I think that that's all really cool. You see Agent Lang come back as well, which to me feels kind of a little out of nowhere, but his story technically hadn't tied up yet. It had been leading up to something all throughout Edgeworth 1, and we finally start to see that come to fruition here at the end of Edgeworth 2 a little. Not a little, a lot. It's a lot, man. It's a lot. So Justine Courtney has a great arc. I'm not going to get into the specifics because there's a lot in this case. Justine Courtney has a great arc throughout. Sebastian has an amazing arc throughout. Blaze? I don't know if he has a more prominent presence in this case than in this case, but he does play this role as the sort of obstacle for Sebastian to overcome and finally come into his own, and I feel like that is done really well. This case introduces a new character called John Marsh, who is this kid who somehow finds himself at the center of everything that's going on, and he even sort of has this revenge sort of motivation straight out of Naruto kind of come into play at the end here, where he sees that Simon, we're going to talk about Simon in a moment, sees that Simon is directly responsible for his father's death and all that. I don't have any strong feelings about John Marsh. I didn't like him at first, but I think he does what they wanted him to do. Kind of works, you know? You're all over the place in this case. The president is found dead in like a monster track. You have this sort of like, Gordy experience bumped up to the max here. You even have Lotta Heart and Lotta Heart 2 come back, which is a double dose of ugh. But I thought the Mighty Moozilla was effing funny, so I'm willing to let some of that slide. Not a lot of it, because Lotta Heart is very, very annoying, and it's even more so when there's two of her, you know? But the Mighty Moozilla was pretty darn funny, I gotta admit. So what else is going on here? While Justine Courtney is trying to get Blaze convicted, you gotta find evidence, and like Sebastian ends up finding it, which is really cool for Sebastian. John Marsh is Courtney's adoptive son, so having her have a personal stake in things really helps, lets you see a different side of her, really adds to her dynamics as a character. I think makes her a way better character here in this last chapter. Agent Lang does a bunch of stuff with like an orphanage, and you have to like go investigate that, and then it's revealed that Knightley and Simon were the kids of Gustavia and the person Gustavia killed, and it's just this huge intricate web of stuff, and there's a lot of characters all in one place here. You got Edgeworth, Agent Lang, Kay, both Lotta Hearts, John Marsh is running around, Justine Courtney is running around, I think Gumshoe is there as well, if I didn't say him already. You get to see like Sebastian DeBest doing a whole bunch of stuff. Sir Dogan is out of prison, because of course he is. Franziska's also there. She doesn't do anything in this case again, but I'm pretty sure she's there. So Justine and Sebastian have all these character moments while you're busy proving that Lotta Heart is stupid, and you help Agent Lang investigate this orphanage to sort of like wrap up his shenanigans where his dad was disgraced or something or other, and he has to put this case to rest because he's like lost his position or something like that. And then you uncover the fact that the president that you met in chapter 1 wasn't actually the president. No. It was actually an imposter who took his place as the president, because you realize that why can't I be the actual president if everyone sees me as that, if I'm his body double, which is very interesting. The president died like a long time ago outside the orphanage or something like that, and it's like a very interesting sort of thing to unrealize. And you also realize how that was like John Marsh's actual dad, and sort of ties him into that plot line. And it all wraps up with Simon Kias being revealed as the main villain, which no one on this planet saw coming until they had to select that it was him. The most well-disguised final villain reveal I might have ever seen in my life. No one would have guessed. The random client. Oh, by the way, that means Regina's here too. So, hooray. The random client you had in the second case of the game, the person you happened to be defending, acting on the behalf of, turns out to be the main villain, and unveils this crazy web of manipulation of how he caused everything that happened in this game somehow, because he's a big brain mastermind. But he didn't put up nearly as much of a fight as Quintus Alba, that's for sure. Which I think is a good thing, because I don't know if I could have handled another one of those. This case was already long enough as it is. I wonder what the longest case in this franchise is. It could be this case. It's probably this case, though, let's be real.
A dragon never yields.
And then at the very end, you have this really cool moment where Shelly the Killer comes back and clashes with Sir Dogan. And I feel it was really cool. I've heard some people say that it was like a little out of place. I thought that was really cool. How he came back after like he sort of left you in this ominous, unconclusive way in this case. I really liked how he came back here. But okay, I've talked about a lot of things. Where does it rank? So what's good, right? Courtney, Sebastian, Simon Kias being the villain. That's all good. The Agent Lang president stuff is also mostly good. There is a lot of good here. There's a lot of characters having their arcs tied up, a lot of plot points being tied up. I do think overall the ending was really satisfying, and it tied together everything that happened throughout the game. Every single one of these chapters was really relevant to this final conclusion. And it just weaves together to make this game a great story. And I haven't even talked in any of these cases about the whole overarching message of how Edgeworth is going on his own arc throughout this game, of figuring out what he wants his path to be. That's the name of the game, Prosecutor's Path, where he's trying to figure out what he really wants to do and how he wants to do it. And that's not something that I can say for Edgeworth 1. And this case obviously concludes with him finding his answer. And I think that is also really well done. But A lot of the case is Mighty Moozilla stuff, which probably would be funny in a way for me to put it as mostly a positive, were it not for the fact that Lotta Hart is always there and you keep having to explain to her why she's effing wrong. And because a lot of the initial investigation is tied to that sort of nonsense. By the way, like, can we talk about how Simon dropped a hot air balloon on the fake president? That crap is ridiculous. That is probably the most unrealistic murder on this list. I don't know if there's another one that's more ridiculous than this. There might be something in Danganronpa because those games get crazy, but I don't know if y'all know how slow hot air balloons descend. There is no way in this galaxy he could have done that, and you can't convince me otherwise. That is absurd and ridiculous, and so much of the case hinges on that because Justine Courtney is like the person they think does it for most of the time, and it's because she escorted him, the president, up to where Simon squishes him, and it's just a mess. This is like Celeste levels of a mess, and it doesn't help that the investigation of looking into the Mighty Moozilla, because of course it's a circus balloon because he works at the very big circus, is not very fun to investigate. Clicking around the movie crime scene. Will Powers is in this case. There's too many characters in this case, I almost forgot. You'd think that a character like Will Powers coming back for an Edgeworth game would be super memorable, but it's just not because this case is chaotic as all heck. So the actual investigating in this case doesn't live up to these three cases. I don't think investigating in this case is nearly as fun as it is in these three cases. This about goes back to Edgeworth 1 levels of fun when it comes to investigating, and Lotta Hart times 2 is a blow to my mental state that cannot be excused, but there's a lot of good here, a lot of good stories, a lot of good arcs. I also think it's a really good conclusion for the game. Great final villain, love that. Lots of characters, probably too many characters, too much going on. But the stuff that's good is the majority of the case and sticks with you for so long that it definitely outweighs the bad by a long shot. Like I said, this case has the most memorable logic chess in the game, and that's an amazing mechanic. Love how things turn out for basically all of the characters. The game ends on a very satisfying note, especially with Edgeworth finding his way in life, it seems. I'm gonna put it in amazing and very enjoyable, because even though Lotta Hart BS, and even though the actual murder of the president is, I can say it, it's BS, this case has so much powerful payoffs, great twists, great characterization. This case does a lot for multiple characters. Remember how I talked about how this case made Ray Shields do a like 180 in my eyes? This case did the same for both Sebastian and Courtney. Do I think it's as good as what this case does for like Mia and Phoenix and the introduction of Dahlia? Not quite. This case is a great ending, and even though Edgeworth does find his answer at the end of this game, I don't think this case specifically does a lot for him so much as it does characters like Agent Lang or like Courtney, Sebastian, etc. So I'm gonna put it right there, and we're gonna do Layton. And after we do Layton, I am gonna re-examine these three tiers to see if everything here is where it's supposed to be.